Hey everyone, welcome back to Monkeynomics. Today's topic is going to be about wealth inequality or income inequality versus economic mobility. Now it is my belief, and this is the point I will try to make throughout this video, that economic, wealth, or income inequality really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all. What matters is economic mobility. The gap between the richest people and the poorest people is actually a sign of an economically advanced society. And I'll demonstrate that. I'm going to use several clips from several videos to demonstrate my point. So to get started, here's a clip from Crash Course Economics dealing with income inequality. Now, I generally like Crash Course Economics, but they do have a bias. They are run by PBS. So when they get into the more ideological topics as opposed to the basic economic topics, they tend to show their cards a little bit better. But let me play this clip from the video and then I'll talk about it.
So we can focus on income inequality. These 10 people represent everyone on the planet, and they're lined up according to income. Poorest over here and richest over here. This group represents the poorest 20%. This is the second poorest 20%, the middle 20%, and so on. If we distributed $100 based on current income trends, this group would get about 83 of those dollars. The next richest group would get $10, the middle gets $4, the second poorest group would get $2, and the poorest 20% of humans would get $1. Branko Milanovic, an economist that specializes in inequality, explained all this by describing an economic Big Bang. At first, countries' incomes were all bunched together, but with the Industrial Revolution, the differences exploded. It pushed some countries forward onto the path to higher incomes, while others stayed where they had been for millennia. According to Milanovic, in 1820, the richest countries in the world, Great Britain and the Netherlands, were only 3 times richer than the poorest, like India and China. Today, the gap between the richest and poorest nations is like 100 to 1. The gaps are getting bigger and bigger.
So I want to briefly touch on the section where they talked about different countries. Now, when all countries had agricultural economies, the wealthiest agricultural economies were only 3 times more wealthy than the poorest agricultural economies. After the Industrial Revolution, the richest industrial economies were many times more wealthy than the poorest agricultural economies. During the Information Age, when economies became more advanced, the richest advanced economies became many more times wealthy than the poorest agricultural economies. Now, have you noticed the pattern here? The pattern is the poorest agricultural economies continue to exist. This is because there's always going to be the very, very, very poor. Some countries simply don't have very good resources. So the disparity between the richest countries and the poorest countries is really a measurement of the economic growth of the world. The richer countries become in general, the wider the gap between the richest country and the poorest country, because there's always going to be poor countries. And you see this individually within countries. The richer a country becomes, the richest person in that country is going to be so many more times wealthier than the poorest homeless person. Because you're going to have poor homeless people in every society. I mean, in the United States, those living in poverty are many times more wealthy than the vast majority of people on Earth. And yet they're in poverty by American standards. We're living in an era where the poorest segment of the population is also the fattest segment of the population. That is unprecedented in human history. The fact that we have an obesity epidemic, the fact that we're so prosperous that we're actually eating ourselves to death, is unprecedented in human history. And the poorest people, the people who should be starving in the streets, are the fattest segment of the population. And yet the gap between the poor, no matter how fat they are, and the rich continues to widen, because the poor will stay in the bottom. There always are going to be people with nothing. It could be because they made bad choices. It could be because they're disabled. It could be because of any number of reasons, but they're going to exist in any society. So that's the main reason why economic inequality isn't even worth talking about. As long as there's economic mobility, as long as someone who's born in the bottom fifth has a chance to break into the top fifth, who cares? Now, the reason why you hear so much about economic inequality and not economic mobility is because economic equality has a government solution, which is taxation and redistribution, which politicians want to do anyway because giving people free money gets them reelected. So because this is a problem, quote unquote, with a government solution, that's all you're going to hear about. However, economic mobility does not necessarily have a government solution. In fact, government can be the problem. Government could be getting in the way of economic mobility. And if the government isn't the solution, if the government is in fact the problem, you're not going to see it talked about very much, especially those who promote government solutions. So let's move into the topic of economic inequality and economic mobility, starting with this clip from Dr. Thomas Sowell.
Income inequality.
Yes.
Okay, listen to Paul Krugman, your favorite economist. Didn't I hear you say that?
Not unless I was absolutely on LSD or my mind has gone completely.
All right. Paul Krugman, writing in his New York Times blog, quote, "Since the late 1970s, the America I knew has unraveled." You might be willing to take that. We're no longer a middle-class society in which the benefits of economic growth are widely shared. Between 1979 and 2005, the real income of the median household rose only 13%, but the income of the richest 0.1% of Americans rose 296%, close quote. The rich are not only getting richer, they're becoming dramatically richer, while everybody else is treading water.
I love it. Well, all I have to hear is the word household income, and I know we're not serious.
Why?
Because households differ over time in size. They differ from one group to another in size, and they differ from one income level to another in size. For example, in the bottom 20% of households, there are 39 million people. In the top 20% of households, there are 64 million people. Over time, the households have been declining in size. So if you had a household in which, at some point in the past, there were 3 working adults,
right,
and now the household has only 2 working adults, and the family is making the same money they always made, that is not stagnation. That is a 50% increase in per capita income, which may be why one of the adults goes off and establishes his own household. He can afford to. So household income are utter nonsense. If you're serious, you look at per capita income, because per capita means one person, and it always means one person. It doesn't mean one person in 1980 and 1.5 persons in 1930, and so it always means one person. So if you're looking for a legitimate comparison, that's what you do. If you're looking to score political points, you go to household income and family income, and voila, you have your political points.
All right.
All right, so now we've touched on the fact that per capita income is more indicative of the individual than household or family income, because household size varies based on economic conditions. I mean, you can see this every day. If you can't afford to live alone, you're going to find roommates, you're going to stay with your parents, you're going to do some sort of living arrangement in order to increase your standard of living. This is going to increase the household size and thus the household income, because you're all combined. Once you all make more money, you're going to move out and find your own place. This is going to lower the family or household income. But you're actually all better off. You're just all better off individually. So it should be a red flag to anyone who understands economics. When someone talks about family or household income, they're trying to be deceptive. In another interview with Dr. Thomas Sowell promoting another book, he talks about how the different classes, the different quintiles of income, actually represent the same person over different phases of their life and don't represent different distinct classes made up of entirely different people altogether.
Although people in the top income brackets and the bottom income brackets, the rich and the poor, as they are often called, may be discussed as if they were different classes of people, often they are in fact the same people at different stages of their lives. Close quote.
Yes.
So getting worked up about income inequality is pointless, ill-informed?
But, yes, and sometimes it's simply a propaganda trick, depending on who's doing it. I read Piketty's stuff.
Piketty, Thomas Piketty, the French economist who published a book this year called Capitalism.
Right, and he's a star around the world for doing so. And he talks about how the top 10% are separate from the rest of us, and they are able to do all sorts of nefarious things. And then since then, I've gone and done a little research, and it turns out that 56% of all American households will be in the top 10% at some point or other in their lives, usually when they're older.
Wow. Over half will be in the top. All right.
Yes. And actually, when you get down to the top 1%, it's even more incredible. Of all the people in the top 1% in the course of a decade, the majority, the great majority, are there 1 year. Only 13% are there 2 years. And so we're talking about people who have a spike in income in 1 year for some reason or other. They inherited something.
They sell their company.
They have assets accumulated over the years, and they sell them in that 1 year. I mean, in the year, I haven't checked, but I wouldn't be surprised if I hit my income peak when I sold my house on the Stanford campus, and have never been near that since. No, and of course, it was all absorbed in paying for another house elsewhere. So
welcome to California.
Right. Now, to demonstrate why economic mobility is what we should focus on and not wealth inequality or income inequality or whatever. I mean, equality as a general concept should never be the goal, ever. Equal opportunity, equality before the law, those are the good type of equality. Once you talk about making things equal, then you're getting into all kinds of bullshit, and it actually ends up doing far more harm than good. But I want to play this video from the Brookings Institute about economic mobility. And I want to stop it about halfway through, and I want to make a little point.
We're going to talk about inequality and opportunity in America. Let's start by dividing the population up into 5 equally sized slices. If you're boring like me, you might call them quintiles. In an absolutely equal society where everybody had the same amount of money, each fifth of the distribution would get a fifth of the money. It would look like this. Of course, that's not how it is. In the real world, the bottom quintile, the bottom fifth, gets 5% of the money, and the top fifth get more than half the money. But I think in terms of fairness, and certainly in terms of American fairness, the question's less what's the gap between the bottom and the top, and it's more what are your chances of making it from the bottom to the top? How mobile is society? How far does where you're born on the ladder affect where you end up on the ladder? So in a perfectly mobile society, an opportunity utopia, being born down here in the bottom quintile would have no effect on where you ended up. You'd be equally likely to make it to the top as to stay at the bottom. But now I want to show you what it's really like. Right now, for the people born at the bottom, more than 1 in 3 of them will remain stuck at the bottom, and just 1 in 10 are going to make it all the way up to the top. That's bad enough, but it's even worse for certain groups in the population. If you were born in the bottom quintile and you're a black American, you have a 50% chance of remaining stuck at the bottom and just a 3% chance of making it Horatio Alger style all the way to the top. So this is the picture for black America. For white Americans, the picture looks close to that utopia with roughly the same chances of making it to the top of the distribution as of being stuck at the bottom. It's those who are born at the bottom and are raised by parents who are never married. And for that group, the odds of making it to the top are pretty slim as well. For them, it looks like this. For those raised by married parents, it looks like this. Again, it's pretty close to what you might hope for in a perfectly mobile society. Those who are born at the bottom, if they're raised by married parents, have a pretty good chance of making it to the top.
So Richard Reeves talks about how black Americans are disproportionately economically immobile. But then less than a minute later, he talks about people raised by a single parent as opposed to 2 parents have these same economic handicaps. It has nothing to do with race. So I'm very disappointed in this section of the video. If you look at single-parent households versus 2-parent households, it correlates to the, quote, race gap. It's not a race gap. It's a single-parent gap. Single parents are the problem. Single mothers are the problem. The reason why black Americans aren't doing as well isn't because of racism, but because of single mothers, because of the welfare state, and because of feminism. Those are the problems in the black community. And he acknowledges this, but then he goes back and talks about, oh, if you're black, this is what happens. No, it's if you were raised by a single mother, this is what happens. The black people who break out of that lower quintile invariably were raised in 2-parent households. Invariably were raised by 2-parent households. And the ones who stay in poverty are invariably raised by single mothers. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. White people raised by single mothers stay poor. Hispanics raised by single mothers are poor. Asians raised by single mothers are poor. The reason why Asians tend to do pretty well is they have really strong family cultural values. They tend not to be raised by single parents, and that's why they're doing so well. So it's not a race thing. If this was all a racist conspiracy, Asians wouldn't be doing well. I mean, if this was all a big white conspiracy to keep the black man down, these racist white people would also be holding Asians down. But they're not. It has nothing to do with race. It's single parent, it's the welfare state, it's women, it's feminism, it's female nature, it's hypergamy. It's all feeding into this. And black people are just the primary recipients of the negative aspects of this because they're overrun with these single mothers. And they're all being so empowered and everything like that. All this stuff that's supposed to help black people ends up going to black women and single mothers, which just makes the problem worse.
So if you don't complete high school, there's a 50% chance you're going to stay stuck at the bottom if you were born at the bottom, and a 1% chance that you're going to make it to the top 20% of the income distribution as an adult yourself. So for them, it looks like this. If you're born at the bottom, born in this bottom fifth, but you're one of the few born down here who managed to get a 4-year college degree, transforms your chances of moving up the income distribution. Go to college. We can have a long argument about the gap between the rich and the poor, but I think we can all agree that we don't want to live in a society where you're born determines so strongly your chances in life of where you end up. America has a dream of equal opportunity, and we're a very long way right now from that dream. We have a big problem, and we need big solutions.
But when you see the statistics for people raised in two-parent households, people who go to college, you see what is close to this, what he calls an opportunity utopia. Now, I want to close this video with a little tough love and hopefully a little kick in the pants. The fact is, if you sit around blaming the rich and try to think that like, oh, the little guy can't get ahead, it's all the rich people's fault, the evil 1%, you're going to stay poor. You can't keep blaming everybody else for your problems. The world has never been more open in terms of economic mobility. If you are watching this video, if you have access to a computer, if you're watching YouTube, if you understand English, if you know how to click a thumbs up and leave a comment, you have what it takes to learn how to code. I don't care if you're disabled. I don't care how fat or whatever the fuck's wrong with you. If you can watch this video and understand the words coming out of my mouth, you could learn to code, which means you can have a high-paying job if you want it. I understand if you're disabled or have something going on, you physically can't work most jobs. But again, if you have YouTube, if you have access to a computer, if you have internet, if you're listening to these words, you have everything you need to learn to code. There are free courses out there which will teach you how to code. In a previous video in my Monkeynomics series, I talked about a website called Allison.com, which offers free training courses that you can get certifications, real certifications to add to your resume. They're not accredited because accreditation costs money. However, they will make your resume look good. So if you're having trouble getting hired because you've been out of the job market for a while, go to Allison.com, get some certifications, add it to your resume, see if that helps. If you want to learn IT, if that's more your thing, and I highly recommend getting some training in IT or technology or computers or coding or something, there's actually a website called Cybrary.it, which offers free IT certification prep materials. And the test only costs a few $100s. And I've talked to people who work in IT. They will hire someone with a certification over someone with a degree. And IT jobs pay a lot. So money is not holding you back. And again, if you have access to a computer and internet, if you're watching this YouTube video, you can do this right now. And I'll post links to these all in the description, Cybrary.it. Another thing is if you want to learn how to code, there are websites like Khan Academy and stuff like that, which will teach you how to code for free. For free. So if you're spending all your days playing video games and jerking off to porn and waiting for the world to somehow like hand you a job and you're complaining about how poor you are, you have no one to blame but yourself. Do something with your time. Do something productive. Even if you're physically disabled, you can code. So do it. There are jobs. They're looking for people, coders and IT professionals for these jobs that pay a lot of money. The opportunity is out there. The tools are before you. They are free. The fact that you're watching this YouTube video, proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that you have access to these tools. So don't tell me you can't do this. Now, if you choose not to take these opportunities, then you're lazy. You're lazy. Now, you could be like, well, it's too hard, blah, blah. Okay, well, then don't complain. Don't complain when you're poor because you refuse to take any opportunities. I don't care if it's hard. If you suck at math, learn to be good at math. If you throw enough hours at something, you're going to get good at it. How many hours do you spend playing video games? How many hours do you spend watching porn and jerking off? You're probably really good at jerking off. I bet you know all the right tricks, like the flick of the wrist and all that fun stuff. You're really good at it, right? Because you've been doing it for a long time. Well, teach yourself how to code. Teach yourself IT. Save up a little bit of money, only a couple $100. Get a few IT certifications, and you can have a good paying job. If you choose not to take these opportunities, it's your own fault. It's not the government's fault. It's not society's fault. It's certainly not the 1%'s fault. It's your fault. So pull your finger out of your ass and get to work. Mobility is strong. You can break in to the upper quintile. You can be in the top 20%. If you work hard enough, you could be in the top 1%. It's a perfectly reasonable, rational goal. You can do it. If you don't want to, if you just want to be in the top 20%, that's cool. Be in the top 20%. I want to be in the 1%, but that's just me. But the opportunities are out there. Seize them. So I just want to leave you with this message. When people talk about wealth inequality, they're talking about getting free shit given to them. They want the government or someone to take from the top and give to the bottom because they're in the bottom and they're lazy and don't want to work. And to them I say, fuck you. Fuck you and the bitch you rode in on. I work damn hard for my money, and I'm not here to share it with you. I will teach you to fish. I promise you I will teach you to fish. I will not share my fish with you. You can go fuck yourself. To those who want to learn to fish, I will teach you everything I know. I will share all my knowledge with you, but you have to do it. You have to get out there and fish. And if you fish, you will be successful. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.